Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone, my name is Hilda Pinasti with student number 051.
Hi everyone, my name is Fatima Akila with the last student number 049.
Hello, my name is Nadia Putri Liandri. My last student number is 014.
Hello everyone, my name is Muhammad Budia Siddiqui with last student number 066.
Hello, my name is Ahmad Dhani with my last student number is 009.
Hello everyone, my name is Muhammad Budia Siddiqui with last student number 066, and I will be the introduction of this material that we will learn today. Alright, I will start the material by explaining again the distinct functions of morphology and syntax. Morphology focuses on the formation of words through process like fixation, compounding, and reduplication. And syntax is concerned with how words are combined into phrases and sentences, involving rules for phrase structure, movement, and interpretation of elements like pronouns. Alright, and interaction between morphology and syntax. Despite their differences, morphology and syntax interact in a number of ways, especially through inflectional morphology, which conveys grammatical meaning crucial to synthetic structure. In morphology, case marking assists to identify the synthetic roles of noun phrases in sentences. Synthetic distinctions are facilitated by inflectional marks such as a tense and aspect affix, which designate clause as conditional, subjective, infinitive, or infinitive, etc. Synthetic links between adjective and nouns or verb and their subjects or objects are demonstrated by agreement markers for person and number. Also, inflection is structural or like a glue. Inflectional morphology plays a crucial role in a sentence cohesion, helping link elements in a way that supports sentence structure. And then valency and sentence structure. Valency is defined as the number of arguments, like the subjects and objects required by a verb affecting the sentence structure itself. The argument structure of the sentence might be affected by changes in valency caused by changes in verbal morphology. Also, blurred boundaries between morphology and syntax. There are instances where it is difficult to distinguish between syntax and morphology. Among the examples are morphemes are derivatives that connect entire sentences. Elements that combine morphology and syntax by appearing neither entirely independent as a word nor fully bound as affixes. Alright, then we jump into the arguments. By explaining the valency, valency refers to the number of arguments a verb needs to complete its meaning. Arguments are essential phrases like the subjects or objects that the verb's meaning implies or requires. Verbs also have types by the valency itself, like intransitive verbs require only one argument, usually the subjects, like the snores in Fenster snores. Also, transitive verbs require two arguments, typically a subject and an object, like divorce in Fenster divorce the pizza. Also, we have the transitive verbs require three arguments, a subject, an object, and a phrase expressing location or receiving, like the puts in Fenster puts the wombat in the bathtub. Also, we have optional arguments. Some arguments are optional but still implied by the verb's meaning. For example, it requires a subject but can have optional object like my good eats tin cans versus my good eats. Even if the object isn't stated, the verb eat implies something that is edible. Also, we have adjuncts. Adjuncts are extra phrases like time, location, and manner that can be added to a sentence but are not necessary to the verb's meaning. Like with great care, investor puts the wombat in the bathtub with great care. Unlike arguments, adjuncts are not required by the verb itself. Also, the valency can change the morphology. Certain Morphological changes can alter a verb's valency by adding or removing arguments. For instance, some forms make an intransitive verb or transitive while others do the opposite. While English has some of these morphological changes, other languages show a wider variety of valency altering of morphology itself.
Hello everyone. I'll be explaining how passive voice and antipassive voice work in language, along with how these forms change sentence structure by focusing on different parts of the action. Let's start with the passive voice. What is the passive voice? The passive voice is a way of organizing a sentence so that the focus is on the patient, the one affected by the action, instead the agent, the one doing the action. In a typical active sentence, like Penster bat the wombat, Penster is the agent performing the action, and the wombat is the patient, the one receiving the action. But if we change this to the passive voice, we would say the wombat was bat by Penster. And now, the wombat becomes the main focus. We can even leave out Penster entirely if we want to keep the focus on the action down to the wombat. How do we form the passive voice in English? In English, we create the passive by using the verb be as an auxiliary or helping verb, followed by the past participle for the main verb. For regular verbs, we usually add ed, as in bat, but with irregular verbs, the past participle changes, like written for write, or sung for sing. Languages have different ways of marking passive sentences. For example, in West Greenlandic, they changed the verb with the morpheme to make it passive. So, in a sentence, the people saw the polar bear, and the passive forms becomes the polar bear was seen by the people. Here, nikar is the morpheme that makes the verb passive. In Maori, there's a suffix tia that turns a verb passive. For instance, huia is scolding Pani, is active, and the passive form Pani was scolded by huia uses kohete tia to signal the passive. Next, what is antipassive? The antipassive voice is similar to the passive voice, but changes the sentence in a different way. Instead of removing the subject, it removes the object. Example of antipassive voice in Yidini. The transitive or the active is this woman eats something. Here, the woman is the subject and something is the object. And the antipassive form, this woman is eating. Here, the verb is modified with tin to indicate that it is now intransitive, not needing an object. And the action is still happening, but we are not saying what is being eaten. Languages like Yidini also use something called an ergative case to mark the subject of transitive verbs differently from intransitive ones. In the antipassive voice, the subject role changes to the absolutive case. If the object does appear, it might be in a different case, like the dative or locative, showing it's no longer a direct object. This can be seen in a sentence like the man saw the dog, where the dog is marked differently, suggesting a change in its role in the sentence.
Alright, so right now I'll be focusing on three important concepts: causatives, applicatives, and non-incorporation. And these terms might sound a little bit complex, but I will break them down simply. First, we have causative. What is causative actually? Causative form allows us to express that someone or something caused an action. Let's emphasize on that. Caused an action to happen. Or in another word, we can say the causer of an action. Okay, for example, like the water boiled. Now, if someone caused this action, the water to boil, we can add an extra part to the verb to indicate that. And it'll be something like Dana made the water boil or Dana boiled the water. So we are focusing on the causer. That's all about causative. Alright, the second one is applicatives. Do you have any idea what is applicative? Alright, the applicative forms lets us show that an action is done for someone or affects someone else. Is done for someone or affects someone else. Okay, you have to remember that it is much different from the one that we have learned about the causative, where we're focusing on the causer. Now we are focusing on the one that gets affected by the action. Okay, let's take a good look and quick look on this example. She cooked, or Diana cooked. If you want to add more information who Diana cooked for, you can add this applicative form. Diana cooked for Jamal. For Jamal is the applicative form. So now we know who Diana cooked for, right? So this helps us to include people who are affected by or get the benefit from the actions. And that's all about it. Okay, non-incorporations. What is non-incorporation actually? Exactly. It is when we combine a noun directly with a verb to create a one single word. Okay, for example, if you want to say he is hunting a house, with noun incorporation, you can make it more simple. You can combine house as a noun and hunting as a verb into one word. House hunting. Or another example, if you want to say to write by hand, you can combine hand as a noun and write as a verb into handwrite. So actually non-incorporation make it more simple. It reduces the need for extra words. And that is all about non-incorporations. Thank you.
Today, I would like to talk about clitics. Clitics are small grammatical elements that cannot occur independently and therefore cannot really be called free morphemes. In terms of their phonology, they do not bear stress and they form a single phonological word with a neighboring word which we will call the host of the clitics. Those clitics that come before their host are called proclitics. Those that come after their host are called enclitics. Two types of clitics. The first is simple clitics. The second is special clitics. Simple clitics, these are reduced form of free morphemes. They are phonologically reduced and subordinated to a neighboring words, often appearing in a similar position as a corresponding free words would. For example, in English, I'll take the pastrami please. I'd like the pastrami please. L and I contains the clitics L and D, which are contracted forms of the orderly verb will and would, and they occur just where the independent words would occur following the subject I and before the main verbs. Second is special clitics. Special clitics are phonologically dependent on a host, but they do not represent the reduced form of an independent words. Instead, they are more closely integrated into the sentence. For instance, in French, je le vois, meaning I see him. The object pronoun le in sentences is considered a special clitic, as it is phonologically dependent on a verb but does not have independent words form of him. The next material is phrasal verbs and verbs with separable prefixes. Phrasal verbs in English consist of a verb followed by a particle of preposition. For example, call up can mean to telephone, which does not directly related to call or up. Chew out can mean to scold, which does not directly related to chew and out. Put down can mean to insult, which does not directly related of put or down. Run up can mean to accumulate, which does not directly related to run or up. Combination often have idiomatic meaning, which mean that their meaning is not always predictable from the meanings of the individual components. The next is separable prefix verbs. This language have verbs that consist of a verb and a prefix that can either stay attached to the verb or be separated depending on the clause structure. For example, in German, the verb aufstehen or to stand up becomes stand auf when used in a main clause. In main clause, the prefix often appears separated from the verb following the subject, while in subordinated clause, it stays attached almost like a prefix.
Hello, my name is Ahmad Dhani with my student number is 009. Here, I want to explain about parasal compounds. In the first, what are parasal compounds? Parasal compounds are unique words formed by combining a small phrase with a noun. Instead of using just a word, they bring together a phrase like stuff blowing up and a noun effect to make a single concept, stuff blowing up effect. And other example include bikini, girls in trouble, gender, and comic book and science fiction fans. It combines a descriptive phrase with a noun to capture a specific idea. And the second, what are they unique? What makes parasal compounds interesting is that they blur the lines between syntax, sentence structure, and morphology, word structure. Normally, phrases belong to syntax while words belong to morphology. Here, phrases and nouns merge to form a single word like unit. This, this mix doesn't fit easily into typical language rules, making parasal compounds challenges to categories. And the third, how do we recognize them? One test for identifying a parasal compound is trying to insert an extra word in a middle. Parasal compounds don't allow this since they act as single units. For example, exciting stuff blowing up effect is fine because exciting modifies the whole compound. But if we try stuff blowing up exciting effect, it sounds wrong because the process cannot be split up. In summary of the capture, this capture explores the overlap between morphologies and syntax, showing how language structure is more complex than it may appear. And the first, morphology influence on syntax. Morphology or word structure can affect syntax by changing how words interact in sentences. For instance, the way verb change, adding ing or add, uh, impacts the sentences structure and meaning. And the second, blurry boundaries in language. Some language feature like parasal compounds don't fit neatly into morphology or syntax alone. Other examples include clitics, small words that attach to other like for position, and parasal verbs with add preposition like take off. And the last one, important for linguists. Understanding this in between features helps linguists see that language isn't always clear cut, but morphologists and syntaxians study these features to understanding language better. This overlap raises essential question about how we categorize and understanding language structure.